Hi, Niklas.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. We are here in Infinita co-work today. And for those who's not familiar with Infinita project, can you tell us a bit about this?
Sure. So we want to make biotechs move faster. Right now, it just takes way too long, more than 10 years, and costs about upwards of 1 billion to get a new drug approved and into the clinic and into people. And we want to change that.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk today about your Montana project, about the Montana law. And the first question is, can you tell me what is broken today? And can you walk me through what happens to a promising biotech treatment after they passes phase 1?
Yeah. So there is a process by which biotechs get approval for new drugs and treatments, right? That's called the clinical trial system that is regulated by the US Food and Drug Administration, and there's equivalent or similar national regulators in many other countries. What is the problem with the system is it takes very long and it's very expensive. There is 3 stages of clinical trials: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is the smallest, so this is just a safety and dosing trial on healthy volunteers. And phase 2 and 3 test for what's called efficacy. Does the drug work? Right? So, and there is, obviously, we want safe and effective drugs. The problem is if you have one monopoly agency as a regulator, the timelines have just gotten longer and longer, and it's gotten very expensive. So that makes it prohibitively difficult for especially smaller biotechs to reach approval, right? So to have a product that they can even give to people in the first place. It's even especially challenging if you're doing new modalities, right? So cell and gene therapies don't have the same level of detail in their regulation as traditional small molecules. It's very difficult for personalized treatments. So for example, you can get vaccines or gene therapies based on your individual genetic profile, right? So these are difficult to get, and there's a whole series of other kind of approaches that are very innovative, but that don't have very clear regulatory guardrails. And what do you do then as a company? That's the difficulty. And that is the challenge we're trying to solve, right? Because regulators and regulatory timelines have really not improving, right? It hasn't been getting better despite many attempts at fixing it, right? Nobody likes the situation right now. Not even Big Pharma likes it, right? Yeah. Patients certainly don't like it. Many of them are waiting to die without any treatments or options, right? So rare disease patients, for example, 95% of them don't have any approved treatment for them, and there's millions in the United States alone. So that's why we learned from the approach in Prospera, like what if you start small, right? Sort of a smaller special jurisdiction based in Honduras has more opportunities to change laws or be more innovative. And that's how the first place where we grew. But then we also discovered what will be a big challenge, or what is a challenge for the companies that we brought here is, well, what about the FDA? Will it accept my data? And that's when we were looking to the United States, because the first Montana law, SB Senate Bill 422, already passed in October 2023. And it was very promising in that it allowed basically any person, any patient, to take a drug and that is not approved by the FDA under right to try, where traditional right to try is just for patients with life-threatening illnesses. So we saw that, and we can take a similar approach here. Let's use the frameworks of US states, right, where it's state medical practice, and build a model where that is starting in Montana now, that we can get to other states, and very importantly, that is designed in a way that it can also be acceptable and amendable to the FDA and to the federal regulator in the long run. That's what the Montana model is built for, right? So it has some additions to the original SB 422 law. The recent one is called 535. And what it has is, it adds a clear regulatory process. Like in traditional right to try, it's like, what do I do now? I need to have my lawyer to figure it out. And now you have a clear process, and there is a special category for a clinic called experimental treatment centers. There is a so-called experimental treatment center review board, where you have scientists look over the safety protocol and for the treatments that biotechs want to offer in Montana. And we as Infinita will play the role on harboring such an experimental treatment center review board and be sort of a one-stop shop. Right? On the one hand, you have biotechs that want to enter Montana and in the future, hopefully, other US states. And on the other side, you have clinics that want to provide these treatments to their patients.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like exact clinics that's going to work here with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have clinics that we'll be working with in Montana. There's two clinics. One is a smaller longevity clinic, and another one is a very large hospital, one of the largest in the state, that we're hoping to be working with once the rules by the Montana department are out. Right, so the law is passed in last year in May 2025, but there is a process by the department of making additional rules and regulations around the licensing process and things like that. So that has unfortunately been very delayed. Right now, the start date is August 21, but we have more than 16 companies ready to provide their treatments and 2 clinics and hospitals that are willing to give it to patients.
Can you tell us the process of working on this law and working on making an Infinita platform for these biotech startups?
Yeah, so I was very positively surprised by how, in a way, easy. It wasn't easy, but it was, when I first got in touch into Montana, I got introduced to their senator, and I told him I'm interested in the law, and he said, why don't you come visit us? And he took like 1.5 days out of his calendar and introduced me to the Chamber of Commerce, to biotech entrepreneurs there, to potential stakeholders there. And I found that very welcoming and exciting. And then he asked me, hey, what else do we need to do so you can bring your business here? And I found that really very inviting. And as a result, I was also looking for what else would I need in the law as a company to make this a viable business model for us, right? And I'm proud that I was able to contribute ideas that ended up making it into the law. For example, the key idea was, all right, we need to have, this is very powerful, right? Any patients can access this, which is great. So I'm off a very libertarian streak, obviously, and I want patients and people to have their own choice. But also I was thinking, well, not everyone is like that, right? And there is also federal law that supersedes state law. So we should think of a model that if we're in a room with the FDA or with policymakers, we're able to say, hey, we have the safeguards in place that are equivalent or even higher to what you do, right? So, and it's often not the safety requirements on the federal side that are the problem, it's more the administration of them. It's more the lack of clarity. It's more the lack of responsiveness. It's really difficult to get meetings. It takes months. You need to pay $20,000 for a meeting and like hundreds of thousands sometimes for submissions of your documents, right? So that is what informed the iteration of this Montana law, right? So you have the treatment centers, you have the review boards, you have solved questions around liability, and also very importantly, and that's one of the main things that is broken with the federal and many states' right to tries, you can make a profit, right? So this is the main blocker for the federal right to try. When you participate as a company, you can charge only at cost. In Montana, now you can charge for profit, right? Which is also part of the reason why we said, all right, we therefore need to then make it strict in the right places and have oversight in the right places. We will have like a stricter informed consent. We have a patient registry and things like that.
Okay. So if I am, for example, a biotech startup founder, what should I do now? Should I like come to Infinita and build here, and you will be as a platform to give me this pathway to after phase 1? Or do I have to go to Montana? What do I have to do?
Yeah. So I think it always depends on you, of course, and what situation you're in and what pathway you choose. But if you haven't yet passed the phase 1, if you're in preclinical stage, if you're working on an innovative biotech or healthcare firm for that matter, I think healthcare is more than just biotech, right? It's also the administration, the treatment, the reimbursement, the insurance. You can come to us here in Prospera. We regularly do events. We do startup demo days. The next one is the Infinita Startup Week in August 31 to September 7. We have done several pop-up cities. We had people here like Tim Draper or Brian Armstrong who've seen these demo days, who were there live. We got tens of millions in funding to some of the startups that came here. So we can give you that we can be a strong initial starting point for you. We have a very strong community that extends to many places around the world, especially in the United States, that carries you and your company that can carry you and your company forward. More concretely, if you have an asset, if you have a drug or a treatment that is currently in a phase 1, likely to succeed, or has already passed the phase 1, then the Montana pathway might be a good idea for you. And it's typically what the biotechs we're working with are attracted to are two things. One is they can have some commercialization, right? So at this stage, post phase 1, you're often funding strapped and you're facing this catch-22, right? So you do need more data to get more funding from investors, right? They want to see more. But you need money to get that data, right? This is a catch-22, right? So in Montana, you can give people the treatment on the right to try. You can collect outcome data, right? And this data can be very useful for you to raise more funding. Plus, you can collect this data in a way that you might even make a limited amount of money or profit, right? Because you can freely charge for it as a free consensual arrangement with the patient, right? So it can be a very good option to get more data and to have some limited commercialization for yourself.
Okay, and I've heard some opinions about Montana law that in the short term it's very good, like patients get new drugs and so on, and some experimental treatment. But in the long term, it can cause some like dangerous consequences. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's medical, right? So medical comes with risks, right? What the Montana law requires is proper disclosure of the risks, like the known risks and the unknown risks, right? So anything needs to be tested, and anyone is the first of something. In Montana, you're not the first one, you're the one after phase 1, after typically 20 to 50 healthy volunteers have tested it, and there's some insights about the dosing, which means there's risk remaining, right? There haven't been long-term studies. With FDA-approved drugs, there have been thousands of patients that took it, right? So it's not just that we have better data about efficacy at this point, we also have more data about safety, right? So this is very important to keep in mind. This is part of the informed consent process. And when something goes wrong, when the treatment doesn't work, there is, there is a process for that when you feel the risks have not been properly disclosed to you and things like that. But what I do think is just new medicine in general is facing risks. It's just a matter of how you're going about collecting evidence about the risks and benefits of new treatments. And my goal is a cheaper, faster, and better model for generating clinical evidence, right? So this is not meant to skip the process of generating clinical evidence. It's meant to speed it up actually and to make it cheaper, so it's more accessible for the biotechs and companies that can otherwise not afford to go through the entire process and have promising treatments and programs die as a result. So this is one example or one concrete number. People often say that 90% of treatments and drugs fail post phase 1. And this is supposed to be an argument against the state pathway because most of these treatments, they're failing. But but when you actually look at the data, and this is all very easy to see in clinicaltrial.gov, there is like a reason for failure or when trials are abandoned. And more than 2/3 of these trials are not abandoned for lack of safety or efficacy data. They're abandoned for commercial reasons. Right? We've talked to hundreds of companies and we see this all the time. So the catch-22 that they can't raise enough money to continue the recruitment, right? So this means there's probably a lot of very promising drugs and treatments that get lost this way, right? So this can be an operation to get more to rescue some of these very promising treatments and programs, and also give patients a chance to try. This is very important to me from an ethical point of view, right? So in the end, it should be your choice as a patient, right? If the risk is properly disclosed to you, you should have a right to try. I think that's just like a basic individual human right that you have, right? There should be the guardrails that you're not abused, right? Because patients are often in a desperate situation. But that's what we're doing with this, building the proper guardrails for that to give patients put patients in the good situations to make an informed choice.
It's actually interesting because you mentioned the ethical question, and like I was thinking, like what happens if the patient is in a situation when he has to choose if he wants to try a risky experimental treatment or not. How can he actually choose this?
Yeah, currently they can't, but they're supposed to, but they can't.
Yeah.
And just give you one thought experiment or example. So if you remember Steve Jobs, right? So Steve Jobs had cancer, and there was standard of care treatment for him that he refused. Like instead, he went with like alternative treatments that he wanted, right? He died. Right?
Yeah.
Would he have been saved with the treatment? Maybe, right? The standard of care was actually pretty, there was a good chance that he would have lived longer. Um, but does the doctor have a right to forcefully impose the treatment on him? No, right? So Steve Jobs has a right for refusal. Why isn't that not true for access?
Yeah.
Right? Why can't a patient that was like, okay, the FDA does not recommend it or to approve it, but you feel strongly that this is something you want to try. You have spent a lot of time researching about this, so you do want to try it. You want to take a risk for yourself, even though it's not approved. That is should actually be ethically, that is equivalent, right? In fact, in the case of Steve Jobs, I think it would be arguably, um, you know, arguably you were losing one of the most productive individuals of our time and age, right? So there's a very large benefit of like a doctor who would have said, no, you're going to get the treatment, right? But this is kind of the ethical or philosophical question that we should be asking ourselves there.
Yeah, I was also thinking that how do we prevent people to go blindly to these experimental treatments? Because, you know, when you're feeling desperate in your sickness, then maybe you will just agree without any research.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's also
Exactly, and I do agree that there is a long history in long medical history of snake oil salesmen and of medical failures, right? So, but I would encourage us to be humble, right, and not overcorrect, right? So any regulation has to go to prevent bad actors from doing bad things, but regulation that overshoots prevents good actors from doing the thing that's their right? So, and there is no like extreme on one side. You should let anyone do whatever they want. Any sophisticated market that has things like insurance will adopt regulations, right? Because otherwise, there's no predictability. There's not insurance for things. There's no predictability for individual actors, right? The question is really just about how can we be maximizing or make it possible for more of the good actors to do the right things while still preventing the bad actors from doing the wrong things.
And do you know some really successful stories since the law was like in 2023, since it was accepted to all the patients?
So the unfortunate reality is nobody has been treated in Montana yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the due date by the Montana Department to release the rules before which they've done that, nobody can be treated. Right? It's August 21. Right. So on August 21, we have dozens of companies, patients, and 2 clinics ready to provide treatments to patients. And there's just to see, so there is patients waiting, for example, like one urologist whose specialty is prostate cancer, who now has been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he doesn't fall under expanded access or federal right to try for various reasons because like the checklist is very long. He is seeking specifically a personalized treatment that reduces his chance of remission. So he's not currently terminal, right? He's just reducing his rate for it to return. And he's an individual that couldn't be better informed about the risks and benefits of this treatment, right? So it is right. He really should be someone who's able should be able to try. There's another 3-year-old kid with a creatine deficiency that right now the standard of care is a treatment that barely works and costs more than $1 million per year. Right, and his father is a Marine who's appreciating that the Navy is paying for it, but he also doesn't want to put that much of a burden on the taxpayer. And there's a new treatment that's much cheaper, very likely to be safe, possibly much more effective. That's currently in a phase 1 in France. right? And he wants for his kid to be able to access that treatment in the United States.
Okay, and what are your expectations? Are we going to see this law in work actually soon?
Yeah. So what will happen is you can already approach us as a biotech or as a clinic that is already in Montana or plans to go in Montana. So the main or the basic requirement is that the treatment is administered in Montana, where the law is, right? So, and then what you can do if you're a clinician, you can apply to be an experimental treatment center with Montana State, right? So we can help you with that. We have most of these contacts. And if you're a patient, you can seek out some of these clinics, like, and you can also approach us to see if we have a fit or a clinic that fits with what you're looking for or is willing to provide these kinds of treatments. And if you're a biotech, you can go through. We already have the members for the review board agreeing to be on the review board. We can't officially form it yet because the rules are not adopted, but we're doing sort of as much of the work as we can as possible to basically be getting started on day one on August 21. And then hopefully we have a broad ecosystem of many different clinics that are willing to provide these treatments, biotech companies that are coming into the state to collect outcome data, to treat patients, patients that come to the state after medical tourism, right? So this is explicitly the goal, right? Montana is a very attractive place to go. It's gorgeous, right? It has beautiful mountains and it has these wide swathing ranges of land and like bison and bears, and it's just outdoor paradise. It has very famous for skiing in the Yellowstone. So that's what we aim to contribute or give to Montana, that the law is successful for that state that was willing to be the first one and the early adopter and makes it a success for them that's bringing business.
Okay, perfect. And what would you suggest to a biotech startup founder who's watching us today? What would you suggest to do this week, like the first step to maybe go here to fill the form to do something?
Yeah, well, apply for Infinita Startup Week. You can go on the freecitiesfoundation.com and you'll find Infinita Startup Week there to see what it's really like, to meet some of the community, to take part in the demo day.
Nice. Thank you so much, Niklas. It was really interesting.
My pleasure.
Thank you.